Today, I want to speak to anyone who has ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or taken for granted. You show up, give your best, stay loyal, but one day you realize someone doesn't value you the way they used to. Maybe it's a partner, a friend, a boss, or even family. The connection feels one-sided and your worth seems invisible. So here's the trick: stop chasing, start choosing. That's it. The moment you stop chasing someone who doesn't value you, the dynamic changes. You remove your energy from their orbit and redirect it to yourself. You take back your power. Suddenly, you're no longer waiting for their attention. You're investing in your own growth, your own peace. And here's what often happens: they notice, because nothing is louder than silence when they're used to your presence. But more importantly, you notice, you realize your value isn't up for debate. It never was. 1. Recognize the shift. One of the most painful but powerful things you can do in life is recognize when someone's energy toward you has changed. It doesn't usually happen overnight. It starts small: missed messages, delayed responses, less enthusiasm in their tone. Maybe they used to light up when you entered a room or seemed eager to hear from you. Now the warmth is gone. You start to notice how you're the one always initiating, checking in, making plans, or showing concern. Conversations that once flowed easily now feel like a chore. You begin to feel like a guest in a space where you were once a priority. It's subtle at first. They still smile, they still say the right things sometimes, but the consistency disappears. They don't follow through like they used to. You begin to feel like an option rather than a choice. Their presence is still there, but the emotional connection is fading, and you can feel it. It's like being in a room with someone who used to hear you, and now they just listen out of habit, not interest. And here's the hardest part: sometimes the person hasn't even changed drastically. You just became more aware. Your sensitivity to the imbalance grew. Your intuition, whether quiet or loud, is trying to tell you something. You're giving more than you're receiving. It's not about keeping score, but healthy relationships, romantic, platonic, or professional, are reciprocal. Value flows both ways. If it's only flowing from you, that's not connection, that's depletion. Recognizing the shift isn't about blaming them or turning bitter. It's about being honest with yourself. It's about saying something doesn't feel right anymore and having the courage to explore that. Most people ignore this phase. They deny it, justify it, and hope things return to how they were. But pretending someone still values you the way they used to doesn't bring them back. It only delays your healing. This moment, this recognition isn't weakness, it's strength. It means your emotional radar is working. It means you've grown enough to notice patterns, to value your own emotional labor, and to refuse to settle for half-hearted connection. When you learn to recognize the shift, you give yourself the gift of clarity. And with clarity comes the power to decide what you'll tolerate and what you won't. 2. Stop explaining yourself when someone stops valuing you. One of the first things you might feel tempted to do is explain yourself over and over again. You try to clarify your intentions, justify your feelings, defend your actions, or prove your worth. You may find yourself writing long texts, initiating conversations just to clear the air, or constantly wondering, did I say something wrong? Did I do too much? Did I not do enough? But here's a truth that can be hard to swallow. People who genuinely value you don't need constant explanations to understand your heart. They pay attention. They ask questions. They listen because they care, not because you force them to. If you have to continually remind someone of how much you matter or how much you've done for them, you're no longer communicating, you're begging. And begging for respect, affection, or basic consideration is a sign that something is deeply off. At some point, you have to recognize that your energy is sacred, and your truth does not require constant validation from someone who's already decided to minimize it. You should never feel like you're in a courtroom, constantly presenting evidence just to justify why you deserve space in someone's life. Relationships, of any kind, are not supposed to feel like trials where you're defending your existence. Also, when you keep explaining yourself to someone who doesn't care to understand you, you're not just exhausting your voice, you're reinforcing a damaging narrative to yourself that your worth is dependent on their acknowledgement. But the reality is, your worth is not up for negotiation. It is not something you argue for, It's something you live out and protect, especially when others forget or ignore it. There's also a psychological cost to overexplaining. It trains your mind to seek external approval instead of trusting your internal clarity. You begin to doubt yourself, second, guess your instincts, and walk on emotional eggshells just to avoid conflict or rejection. Over time, this erodes your self-confidence and replaces it with self-doubt, and often the more you explain, the less they listen. Why? Because when someone has mentally or emotionally checked out, they're not seeking understanding. They are seeking distance. And your explanations, no matter how sincere, start to sound like background noise. You're putting in effort that they're no longer matching. So stop, just stop. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. If they can't see it, that's their loss, not your failure. The people who truly respect and appreciate you will ask for clarity when they're confused. They won't make you feel like your feelings are too much or that your needs are a burden. They won't make you explain your humanity like it's an inconvenience. The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment you reclaim your voice, not to plead, but to declare, I know who I am, I know what I bring. And I'm not going to keep repeating it to someone who's no longer listening. 3. Withdraw with dignity when someone stops valuing you. The natural instinct for many is to hold on tighter. You may feel the urge to protest, to fight for their attention, to confront them again and again, hoping that something will shift. But sometimes the most powerful response isn't a reaction, it's withdrawal. Quietly, calmly, with dignity. Withdrawing with dignity means stepping away, not in anger, not in bitterness, not to provoke guilt, but because you recognize that you deserve better than emotional crumbs. It's a conscious choice to stop feeding energy into a space that no longer nourishes you. This doesn't mean you don't care anymore. It means you care enough about yourself to stop shrinking in places where your value is being ignored. There is a deep strength in knowing when to walk away without causing a scene. When you withdraw with dignity, you're not trying to manipulate a reaction, you're not playing games, and you're not making grand exits. You're simply choosing not to fight for a seat at a table where your presence isn't appreciated. You're preserving your self-worth instead of trying to prove it. The beauty of a dignified withdrawal is that it doesn't burn bridges. It simply stops you from crossing them when there's no welcome on the other side. It allows you to walk away without turning cold, without turning vengeful. You detach without drama, which is often more unsettling to those who expected you to chase, plead, or explode. Silence in the right context is a powerful message. It says, I know who I am. I don't need to perform to be seen. This approach also gives you time and space to recenter. When you're constantly wrapped up in being undervalued, your self-perception starts to mirror how others treat you. Stepping back allows you to reconnect with your own truth, your own voice, and your own priorities. You begin to remember what it feels like to move through life, not waiting for someone else's approval or affection. People may wonder where you went. They may suddenly notice your absence more than they ever acknowledged your presence. And while that can be validating, it's not the goal. The real victory lies in choosing peace over chaos and self-respect over forced connection. Dignified withdrawal isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your emotional freedom. It's not weakness to walk away quietly. In fact, it takes far more emotional maturity to choose grace over reaction, especially when your heart is still hurting. But that choice protects your integrity. It sends a message, not just to them, but to yourself. I don't have to stay where I am not honored. I don't have to beg to be seen. I will not be reduced just to be kept. 4. Focus on self-worth when someone stops valuing you. The temptation is often to internalize their behavior and begin questioning your own worth. You might start asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Was I not good enough? Why did they change? This kind of thinking can trap you in a painful cycle of blame and insecurity. But the truth is, your worth isn't defined by how someone else chooses to treat you. It's defined by how you choose to see yourself, especially in moments when others don't. This is where the power of focusing on self worth comes in. Instead of pouring energy into trying to fix or chase someone who has stopped appreciating you, begin turning that energy inward. Ask yourself, how am I showing up for myself? What have I been neglecting in my own life while trying to earn someone else's validation? Self-worth is not about arrogance or inflated ego. It's about deep recognition of your value, your heart, your intentions, and your contributions, even when others fail to acknowledge them. It's about looking in the mirror and knowing, without anyone else's approval, that you are enough, that you deserve respect, that your love, loyalty, kindness, and time are gifts, not entitlements. Focusing on yourself worth means you stop measuring your value based on how often someone calls, texts, compliments, or chooses you. It means understanding that your identity is not dependent on someone staying in your life. People come and go. Their capacity to love you may be limited. Their perception of your worth may be clouded by their own wounds, distractions, or immaturity, but that doesn't change your inherent value. This shift in focus also empowers you to rebuild what neglect may have weakened. Maybe you lost touch with your passions. Maybe you stopped investing in your goals. Maybe you've been so busy prioritizing someone else that you forgot how to prioritize yourself. Reconnecting with yourself worth helps you realign with what brings you joy, peace, and strength, things no one else can give or take away. And here's the beautiful part: the more you cultivate your self-worth, the less you tolerate being devalued. You naturally start setting boundaries. You stop overextending yourself for people who offer you little in return. You begin to attract relationships that reflect the way you now treat yourself, with care, with consistency, with respect. Self-worth also teaches you something crucial. You don't have to earn love by abandoning yourself. You don't have to beg for affection by dimming your light. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy of kindness. The more you understand this, the less desperate you feel for someone else's recognition, because you've already given it to yourself. In every season of life, especially the painful ones, your self-worth is the anchor that keeps you grounded. When someone stops valuing you, it's not a cue to fall apart. It's a signal to go deeper within and remind yourself of who you are, what you deserve, and what you will no longer accept. 5. Let them feel the loss. One of the most transformative things you can do when someone no longer values you is this: step away and let them feel the loss of you. Not out of spite, not to manipulate them, but to allow reality to settle where it needs to. Because sometimes people don't realize what they had until it's no longer right in front of them. When you're constantly present, always giving, always available, people can begin to take you for granted. Not necessarily out of malice, but simply because your presence becomes a given. Your love becomes expected. Your kindness becomes background noise. And what once felt like a blessing starts to feel like a default setting they don't have to work to maintain. By stepping back, you interrupt that pattern. You take away the emotional cushion they were leaning on. You remove your energy from their life, the attention, the support, the loyalty, and suddenly there's a gap. That gap is important. That gap teaches. Letting someone feel your absence isn't cruel, it's clarity. It's showing them, without yelling, without begging, without over-explaining, exactly what your presence meant. Sometimes the weight of your silence communicates more than your words ever could. It gives them space to realize what they dismissed. It allows them to sit with the consequences of their apathy, neglect, or inconsistency. But more importantly, it gives you space too. Space to stop defining yourself by someone else's response to you. Space to heal, to reflect, and to detach from an unbalanced connection. Because clinging to people who undervalue you not only hurts, it delays your growth. It teaches you to normalize being overlooked, and that's a lesson you must unlearn. Letting someone feel your loss is not about hoping they come running back. It's about knowing that your presence was a gift, and if they couldn't see that while you were there, they need to learn to live without it. That's how respect is restored. That's how dignity is protected. And if they don't notice your absence, if they continue as if nothing has changed, that too is valuable information. It tells you exactly where you stand, not in their words, but in their actions. And that knowledge, however painful, is liberating, because now you're no longer holding on to a fantasy. You're no longer chasing a version of someone that doesn't exist. Letting them feel the loss teaches both of you something. It reminds them that access to you was never a guarantee. And it reminds you that love, presence, and loyalty should flow both ways, or not at all. 6. Don't wait for closure. One of the hardest parts of being devalued by someone, especially someone you deeply cared about, is the ache of unfinished conversations and unanswered questions. Your heart craves clarity. Your mind wants reasons. You long to understand why things changed, what went wrong, or how someone who once cared could become so distant. And so you wait. You wait for a message, a call, an apology, or some final moment of honesty that makes it all make sense. But here's the truth. Closure isn't always something others give you. Sometimes it's something you give yourself. Waiting for closure from someone who walked away, ghosted you, or emotionally checked out is like standing at a locked door, knocking endlessly, hoping it will suddenly open. You waste precious energy trying to make sense of behavior that may never be explained. Not because you don't deserve an explanation, but because some people simply aren't capable of giving you the emotional maturity or honesty you seek. And the longer you wait for someone to offer closure, the longer you put your healing on hold. You remain tethered to the story, replaying memories, dissecting every word, wondering if you misread the signs. This kind of waiting traps you in limbo, a place where your mind can't move forward because your heart is still stuck in yesterday. But the real shift happens when you realize you don't need their words to bring peace to your own story. You don't need their version of the truth to validate your experience. You were there, you know how it felt, you know what you gave, you know what changed, and that's enough. Closure doesn't have to come with a neat bow or a perfect explanation. Sometimes closure is simply accepting that the way they treated you is all the explanation you'll ever need. Their silence, their distance, their disregard, those are answers, even if they aren't the ones you wanted. And while that may hurt, it also frees you from chasing a resolution that might never come. Letting go of the need for closure is not about pretending it didn't hurt. It's not about suppressing emotions or pretending you're fine. It's about saying, I may never fully understand why they changed, but I refuse to keep waiting for them to help me heal. It's about reclaiming your time, your peace, and your power by no longer outsourcing your emotional freedom to someone who didn't protect it when they had the chance. You get to decide when the story ends, not them. You get to close the chapter even if they left mid-sentence. You get to walk away without needing their permission or participation. And when you do, something profound happens. You stop needing closure because you've chosen growth instead. Closure isn't about getting the last word. It's about getting the last sense of self-respect back. 7. Choose peace over attention in a world where visibility is often confused with value. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that being noticed means being loved, especially when someone who once made you feel seen suddenly stops acknowledging your presence. Your instinct may be to fight for their attention. You might go out of your way to be noticed, to remind them of what you were, to prove you still matter. But here's the hard truth. Attention is not the same as respect. It is not the same as love. It is not the same as peace. Attention can be fleeting. It can be shallow. It can be given out of guilt, boredom, or ego, not out of genuine care. You might get their eyes on you again, but that doesn't mean their heart is with you. And when you prioritize attention over peace, you often sacrifice your inner calm just to feel relevant in someone else's world. You start performing instead of just being. You become reactive instead of grounded, and slowly, you disconnect from your own center. Choosing peace over attention means recognizing that being at peace with yourself is more valuable than being on someone else's radar. It means walking away from situations where your presence has to be loud to be acknowledged. It means saying no to emotional games, no to manipulative cycles, no to temporary validation that costs you long-term self-worth. It also means making a powerful shift from external dependence to internal stability. When you no longer need someone to notice you in order to feel okay, you begin to reclaim a quiet, unshakable strength. You start surrounding yourself with people and environments that nourish your mind, respect your energy, and honor your boundaries, not just those who give you momentary attention when it's convenient. Choosing peace doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you're passive or avoidant. It means you've matured enough to understand that your well-being is not worth sacrificing for someone who can't consistently show up for you. It means you've learned the difference between connection and chaos, between someone who genuinely values you and someone who only misses you when it's too late. When you prioritize peace, you also begin to attract different dynamics. You become less drawn to drama and more attracted to authenticity. You stop craving highs and lows and start appreciating stability. You realize that love doesn't have to be loud to be real, and presence doesn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. Peace is not the absence of people, it's the presence of clarity. It's the quiet knowing that you don't have to chase, convince, or compete to be valued. It's understanding that when someone doesn't value you, the answer isn't to scream louder, it's to walk away softer. And in doing so, you preserve the most important relationship of all, the one you have with yourself.